There's two common errors that I find Christians making, especially as we're coming up to elections like this year. And that is, we can know the future, and all the problems are out there. And I'll explain what I mean by that. The first one is that we can know the future. I normally, not exclusively, speak in more conservative environments. And so I'm kind of focusing on conservatives, but people that are less than conservative also make the same error. But certainly a lot of conservatives make this error. I've heard it a ton of times. And that is, if so-and-so gets elected, then our country's done for. Now, you don't even need the Bible to know that that's problematic. And the example I'd go to, there's a lot of examples we could go to. But in American history, let's say you're a conservative and you're living during the time of Woodrow Wilson, and you're just aghast by his, quote, liberal policies. And you're thinking, oh, Woodrow Wilson, it's the end of America, there's no more conservative dream, blah, 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 blah. And then about 60 years later, you have the Reagan Revolution, you have the Berlin Wall falls, you have the breakup of the Soviet Union. So if you study history, you realize unexpected things happen all the time. American context, we have revivals, we have all kinds of things that have been disruptive both positively and negatively. But to think that we can say we know confidently the future, we say that a lot of times, I hear a lot from Christians, a lot of know better both historically and biblically, is really problematic. The second thing that I hear a lot of is when Christians are talking about the challenges today, and there are a lot of them. We have a fractured American experiment, certainly a lot of people questioning all kinds of things, is that a lot of the language I hear is what I would call externalized problems. That it's all the people out there that have a different worldview or perspective than me, they're the problem. And what I want to suggest is the Bible says the household of God, that judgment starts with the household of God. And so imagine a guy in your neighborhood. He's starting a landscape company. And he comes, knocks on your door, and he says, hey, I'm starting a landscape company and I'd love to landscape your yard, blah, blah, blah. And you say, okay, well maybe, hey, you just live a couple doors down from me. Let me come look at your backyard. And he's kind of reluctant, like, well, no, you don't really need to do that. I know what I'm doing. And you go, no, I'd really like to see what you've done with your yard, and that would be helpful for me to see, and all that. So very reluctantly, he says yes. And you come to his yard, and it's all like weeds and out of control and ugly. And you're thinking, man, take care of your yard first, and then have the credibility to start a landscaping company. So yes, there's all kinds of problems out in the world, so to speak, in culture. But we also ought to look at ourselves and ask, am I living the kind of life that commends Christ to people? Or are there things that really I'm pretty badly compromised about? You know, maybe my temper, maybe I'm impatient. And obviously we're all in process, no one's perfect. But I'm talking about a degree of integrity when we go out into the world. And again, the notion, it's interesting, very conservative Christians who would say they officially have a big view of sin, if you actually listen to the words that are coming out of their mouth, it's like, well, you would think by just the words that are being said, there's very little sin that resides in them, and pretty much all the sin is outside, external to them. And so I think we need to have a more balanced biblical view, really, frankly, not just balanced biblical, a biblical view on what does sin say about us. Think about Daniel. There's really, Daniel is mentioned in the Bible as someone that we know he's a sinner, but there's really no real significant sin we know that he committed, or even small sin for that matter. And yet, in the waywardness of Israel, he uses the first person plural. He says, we have sinned, God. We have sinned. And others you find in the Old Testament doing the same thing. There's a sense in which they're owning the sin just as much as those who have been really, really wayward. And so again, as we think about those two common errors, and again, it just seems like it's always an inflection point with elections, especially big national elections, that either we go, oh, if this happens, I know for certain that all these other horrible things are going to happen, or if this person gets in, I know all these wonderful things are going to happen. I just know it. And then the other one is like talking about sin as just so external to us. So I think we need to rethink both historically and biblically what we're really saying when we say those sorts of things.